Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by John Deere. I've got Greg Machinery Pete Peterson back on here to talk about what's happening in the world of machinery. Greg, how you doing this morning, bud?
I'm doing well. How about you, Casey?
Doing all right, man. I'm in the great state of Minnesota right now. Thinking about going out and purifying myself from the waters of Lake Minnetonka here in a little bit, but it's
a little chilly this morning.
Be a little chilly this morning, but yeah, it's a neat little town that we're in there up here for doing a meeting with some people, and it's Excelsior, Minnesota's a neat little town. They got a lot of cool little stuff down there. So.
Yeah, Minnesota. Yeah, that's a cool spot there for sure. A lot of history in that area.
Yeah, saw some kids out here yesterday. Now it's pretty chilly as we're talking about this, but there's some kids out running around yesterday in t-shirt and shorts, and I looked out the window and like it might as well be a hot summer day to these kids from Minnesota right now because it's 40 degrees and it's beautiful right now, right?
I was going to ask. I was assuming they had shorts on, maybe tank tops. Yeah. So once it gets to be April, we don't care what the temperature is. It's shorts time up here.
Yeah. So do you have second winter in Minnesota like we have in the Panhandle, Nebraska?
Yeah. Well, April has been not friendly the past number of years here, 3-4 years. So we're starting to consider it. We used to think it was spring. Now it's actually part of winter. No snow at the moment. So we're crossing our fingers. I think we're out of the woods here, but you guys get a second winter there in the Panhandle?
That's typically when all the worst blizzards show up. Is last part of March into April and sometimes into the 1st of May, but that's usually the worst part of winter is usually the first part of spring. So it's
I think I did see data the other day on Minnesota snow over the course of the last number of decades. March into early April has become one of the snowiest periods of the calendar year, and it used to be back in the dead of January, February, but now not so much. That snow comes later usually.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we had we talked about this on here several times, but the world of online auctions have changed with the way things are happening. We're seeing more auction activity in April than we typically have seen in the past, and I think a lot of things probably factor into that. But more than anything, the activity we're seeing is definitely there. You brought up a really cool thing that I've been watching in the market, especially at where I'm at, because of the amount of moisture that's in the air and dew points and those kind of things, but are steamers associated with round balers, big square balers, those kind of things. You saw one sell on an auction last Thursday, right? And it was
last Thursday,
162, right?
Yep, it was out. I was out west. It was I think a farm auction, Juniper, Idaho. Van Tassel auction had the sale, and they had a Staley West dew point 6210, hay steamer. I think it had 464 hours on it. Just the steamer, it brought 162,000. Yeah. And then also on the auction, they had a large square baler in New Holland. I think it was a big plus 340. That brought 30,000. Yeah. That one had I can't remember how many. 21,037 bales through that one. So that was that Staley West. I saw that price, and I had to go out to YouTube, Casey, and look into that a little bit. But apparently, they're really coming on.
Yeah. So that 162,000. Do you remember what year it was?
Didn't say what year. No, just again the hours. It said 464 hours. So I'm assuming just a couple years old.
So I'm guessing. This is pre-COVID, right? So everything took a huge step. But if I remember correctly, one of those things, brand new, 2017, 18, 19. 2020 type of time frame. I want to say they were in that 150, 175 range. So that brought the money. I mean, even at COVID prices at say it was 225 or 250 for something that unique and that niched at 162, that really I think it brought the money considering where the market would be at.
Yeah, I know it caught my eye, and you've been at watching the used market and items and categories for decades, Casey. So you're right. Usually. I won't say usually, 2/3 of the time, usually, I would say over my 35 years, when you do run across a high dollar item like that, that's a niche, at auction, they can be historically they can be challenging, but I think coming out of COVID, when nobody had any inventory and manufacturers were only limiting their production, and then you factor these hay steamers, and again, I admit I don't know much about them up here in Minnesota, but out on YouTube, it seemed like there was a lot of momentum to them. So now you've got kind of a item you don't see very often, and here's a like new used one that shows up, and like you say, 162. That's the dollars were there.
Yep. Then you brought up the big square baler on the backside of that, and big square balers are another interesting animal at auction, because typically at auction either they have like 5,000 bells or 65,000 bells on them, and they either bring $100,000 or $30,000, and then that's the crutch of the big square baler marketplace, is that the amount of reconditioning costs that go into one of those machines after you put a large number of bells on there really starts to reflect that in the auction price.
Yeah, tracking them over the years, big, just like you said, big variance in condition and pricing, Casey. It was interesting that same day, last Thursday, we were tracking two other auctions that had large square balers. One was out in the Northeast, out in, I think it was Plattsburgh, New York. I think it was J. Martin Auctions. J. Martin Auctions had the sale. And they had a 22 model deer L331. Now that one was one of those low ones. Only had 919 bales through it, and it brought $100,000. And I haven't seen many L331s. But again, that same day, last Thursday, then you go deep south. You had a consignment auction in Seminole, Texas, by Ironbound Auctions. I believe it was an online sale, and they had a Massey. I don't know if I caught the year on it, but it was a 2270 XD. And see if I can find the number of bales through. They brought 72.5, I think. So I thought from the deep south on a consignment sale, 22.5 was pretty decent.
Yep. This is also the time of year where you start seeing, 4-wheel drive with silage blades and those kind of things start running through auctions. Guys getting ready. It's packing season. It's not far away. Right? Are you seeing any of that kind of activity come through the sales right now?
Yeah, actually, that same sale in New York I mentioned with the L331, they had a 9410R. I think it was a 14 model, had the 18-foot grouser front blade on it, had just under, I think it was 3,743 hours on it, and it brought 245. So again, just over 10 years old. And those blades, I remember, Casey, we filmed an auction, it was 2 years ago in Michigan. It was a guy that came over from the Netherlands and with nothing decades ago, and he went to work for a big dairy operation, and he wound up making this huge farming operation on his own. But that was when the R series, the 9R 4-wheel drives had just come out. First couple I saw at auction, and he had big massive blades on the front, and of course that was a couple years ago. It was sort of towards the top of the market, but boy. Those were some high dollar rigs, made for good viewing on Machinery Pete TV, I guess. But that same sale in New York had a couple other hay items that were interesting. It had an Oxbow merger. It was a 20 model, 2334, 34-foot triple merger. It had 1,613 hours on it. That brought 126. And then a self-propelled disc bind, a 19 model Deere W260. 16-foot head, just under $900, went for $122.5. And then off.
How many hours were on that one?
What's that?
How many hours were on that W260?
The W260 had 879 hours, 16-foot head, $122.5 on that one. And I have seen a whole bunch of those, not just that model, but the self-propelled disc binds. If you're old like me, we still call them swathers, whatever. But a whole bunch of those sold across the country here lately. I know there was one yesterday in Nebraska. More average condition. It was an older New Holland H8040. And I think that one brought, I think it was like $47,000. But that sale, Casey, had another hay item that I just posted about on our social media. It had a Case IH RB565 premium round baler. Didn't say what year it was, but it was very good condition. It had 3,214 bales on it. One owner, brought $50,000.
Yeah.
And that's the third highest auction price I've ever seen on an RB 565 premium. And it's interesting to note, we saw one about a year ago out of Hydro, Oklahoma, consignment auction down there that was brand new, a 22 model, no bales on it. And that brought 52. So here again, just yesterday, it was consignment auction, Hardington, Nebraska. Creamer Auction Company had that sale. 50,000 with one with, again, over 3,000 bales on it.
Yeah. The W260 feels kind of light, a little bit light, where the market's at, but with 800 hours on it. But I could be way off on that one too. But everything else we've talked about so far today, the 9R, the 9R that we talked about, the blade on there, felt like that was worth the money, that what the hours considered. And then you start talking about these round balers, especially with $50,000 for that round baler. Yeah, I think the name talking about where we're showing like, hey, the auction market is starting to stabilize and start to bring some decent money again.
Yeah, good use round balers have been strong. I'd say a little over a year now. I remember a point maybe last May, June-ish, right in there. I think in a span of a couple of days, we saw the two highest auction prices ever on New Holland round balers. One came out of, I think, Southern Virginia. Jason Aycock auctioneer sold that one. It was an RB roll belt 560. I think it was low 50s, 52 or 53,000-ish. And then we had another one that 2 days later that sold higher. So again, whether it's the price of new, I think if we look on the back end at machinerypete.com in terms of supply for used round balers, I mean, there's some out there, but it's not like other categories where there's like quite a gap.
Yeah.
So obviously, Econ 101 works there, supply and demand. And the time of year, it's a pretty good time of year to be selling a baler if you got one.
Yep. Most people are either in first cutting or on their way to first cutting. Like we're typically the Panhandle, we're right around the first part of May. The first week of May to the middle of May is first cutting, so we're right in that full swing. But if you're in Texas show, you might be
right
on your second cutting.
We did have a couple interesting ones. We had some sparks flying on our Machinery Pete social media, our Facebook page last night, Casey. My friend Corey Craig out of Edinburgh, Illinois, had a consignment sale on Sunday, actually. So it would have been April 13th. And he had a Case IH 7220 two-wheel drive. I think it was a 96. It only had 713 original hours on it. Now, it didn't look like it. But I think it brought with the buyer's fee on it, I think it was low. So it was like 73,815, I think was the number.
Oh, wow.
Which is the second highest price. It's almost 30 years old. But of course, people were commenting on oh my God, Pete, there's no way that's 700 hours. That's 10,700 hours. Hey, I just know what it brought.
What tech is, right?
Yeah. And I've known Corey many years. He's a great guy down there in Illinois.
Yeah.
It is funny. A lot of times over the years, visually you look at something and you'll go, there's no way that thing's got 1,000 hours on it. And I get it. It's a lot of times people do fudge on that, but it is surprising the number of times, maybe the dude for whatever reason just left it outside. I don't know. I've been at it so long. I've run across so many deals, and it's, people, we all roll a little bit different. So it's interesting. But anyway, that 72 brought some big money.
Yeah. There's a lot of machines that live inside the big blue shed. There's a
the big blue shed. Yeah.
I see a lot of machines out there that have spent their life inside the big blue shed, and it's and you can tell it. And they might only have 1,000 hours on it, but it looks like they have 10,000 hours on it. And all that too is also where it's at. The further south you go, it feels like the harsher the sun is on the equipment. So.
Hey, if we want to talk going south, I did have one Saturday that made me smile, Casey. It came out of Uniontown, Alabama. Consignment sale down there. It was a Case IH STX 440 four-wheel drive, which I don't see a ton of those. They're back in the early 2000s, 2001 or something. And this thing had 7,186 hours on it. And again, consignment sale out of Alabama. But now this thing was painted to be Steiger green. Not just painted green. They put the Steiger lettering.
I saw your post about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was interested. It brought $70,000. Which, for over 7,000 hours consignment sale out of the Deep South, I thought was pretty good. But again, it was custom paint job. So over the years, interesting when you run across those things. Sometimes it works in your favor when you sell it, sometimes not.
It's the old county orange paint job you see on some of these tractors when they come through, these mowing tractors.
Right.
You don't know if it's a Kubota or if it's a John Deere. You can't really tell until you get real close to it,
Paint, DuPont overalls and such. Yeah, that's
Yep.
people usually, now that case 7220 is a pretty good example. See, some people, it said 713 original hours, and some people would say, well, why, if that's the case, why didn't you just, repaint it, make it look like new? But over again, 35 years I've been doing that, usually it's best to just leave it as is, and then, say, well, whatever, big blue shed, whatever, that's why it looks like this. When you repaint, it usually introduces a lot of questions, but people have preferences.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Get a little bit of that Dakota Shine on there. I've used that before. You ever seen that?
Hey, Dakota Shine. I know Lynn Odland, the owner, very well. People see his ads on our TV show, and I've known Lynn over 10 years, and he's an interesting guy there in Mitchell, South Dakota. He's a chemical engineer. He went to Oklahoma State on a rodeo scholarship. He flies his own plane. He farms. But he came up with this formula. It's got corn and soy derivatives in it, and I've seen firsthand how it works. It brings the life back to the paint. It's pretty amazing.
When I first started working in the business, I worked for a Challenger, a cat Challenger dealer back in Wichita, and they had we had some Challenger CH65Cs that we were trying to make shine. They said use this Dakota Shine thing, and I'm like, what's this do? It's amazing. It made it look brand new again. You know what I mean? And it was very, very. It's almost like you're just spraying on clear coat, basically, on the paint, and it shine it up nice, clean it up good, and spray it on there. And it's amazing how much it brought it back to life.
What I found interesting getting to know Lynn over the years was that, and people on the egg side that until a few years ago just hadn't heard about Dakota Shine, and that was sort of because Lynn went after the construction equipment industry with his product back 20 plus years ago. So he's been working with Caterpillars and United Rentals and Sunbelt Rentals and, Cabelco and Genie Lift and those companies. And I think when you buy and sell in volume and have trade-ins and you're always moving stuff, if you can make whatever you're selling look better, whether it's a 20-year-old lift or a telehandler, doesn't matter. It just sells for more money. So Lynn, being a farmer, he followed our machinery Pete stuff for years, and he reached out, and I was super intrigued by his background. And again, just the chemical engineer. Our youngest daughter is a chemical engineer, so I knew nothing about any of that stuff, Casey. But when our daughter went through Purdue, I would just ask her a lot of questions. And for any young listeners or viewers we have out there, here's a little machinery Pete tip for you. Don't tune out on your math and science when you're in middle school or high school. Grind away on that stuff, because I tell you what, engineering field is freaking amazing. If you're an engineer, it's the way you think about and solve problems. So you get an engineering degree, you actually can go into business, you can go into law, you can go into med school, you can go into research, but you have so many doors open. But it's based sort of on the way you attack problems. So again, I'm a huge fan of those folks with those engineering degrees.
Some of the best salespeople I've ever been around were former engineers somewhere in their life, because again, they could sit there and go through the problem, and the way their mind thinks is different than a big dumb animal like me.
And also, think of all the farmers, your customers over the years, Casey. And farmers, back in the day, like my great-grandfather was a blacksmith in a little town of Tolly, North Dakota. So back then, when your world was smaller, you just had to figure out your own solutions on the farm. And still today, farmers are doing that. And maybe that hay steamer is a good example. It's like, shoot, we need to figure out a better way to do this. And they just, smart folks get it done.
Right. All right, man. Good place to stop, Greg. If folks want to get you to come speak at their event, easiest way is to go to machinerypete.com and check that. Click on the link
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, there's a contact button there. Send me a note or reach out on Twitter or X or Instagram, whatever. Yeah, it's let me know what sales are happening in your corner of the world, folks. Always helpful to have more eyes and ears out there.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, Greg, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next week.
Sounds good, Casey. Have a good week.
Yeah. All right, stay tuned for more Moving On podcasts after these great messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you.
See you next year, loser.
That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like ExactApply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
Welcome back to Moving On Podcast. Got Rich Posson on to talk about what's going on in the world of economics. Plenty of stuff to talk about here, but before we get to that, Rich, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Doing good. So you got your new website up and your new platform for your podcast. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, in the past I've had two separate sites, which was kind of confusing. One of them was just for the videos and subscriptions and that. I'm now combining one site. It's a brand new site, has a good new look to it. And I've also set up, and I use a different host, by the way, as well, and it's just embedded inside that site. But I have three subscriptions rather than one. And one of them is that it's the stock market package with the economy, bonds, crude oil, things that I think relate to the economy and stock market. So it is a stock market economy focus, but there's other things in it, a few commodities. The second forecast is the grains only, corn, wheat, soybeans. And that really, for those, I have a few people that's all they're ever interested in, and it makes it really, really cheap for them. So I split it that way. But there's a third subscription that actually puts the two together, because I didn't realize it till just I started to do this. 80% of the people actually want both. But anyways, at least I helped the other 20%. So three different subscriptions there. And unlike most of the way professionals in the business, you normally get a 2-week trial and that's it. I made it 60 days. I said, why not? And this way I know people are really gonna get hooked on it and stay with me for the rest of the decade. So 60-day free trial, and you have a choice of either splitting it up with just the grains or the stock market economy, or get them both. And so take a look at that. That's at criticalpointpod.com, and the other site is going away in a matter of a few days, but criticalpointpod.com.
Right on. Okay. Check it out, folks. A lot of good information there. And you want to just a teaser, go download the Critical Point podcast on Apple and everywhere else you can find podcasts, and you can get those quick daily hitters, which will give you the scratches the surface as to what Rich is doing out there. So check those out. All right, Rich, let's jump in here and talk about what's going on in the overall economy. Got consumer sentiment report came out here today, I believe, right? And
yes,
today being the 11th of April. And no big shocker there. People were a little concerned about what they had, but I think when you and I were talking, what struck out to me more than anything was the fear of inflation and what that might look like, not by the professional, but by the actual people, the common,
right,
run-of-the-mill American out there looking at the overall economy.
Yeah. So it started turning down about a month or two. And my model warned that even though I was looking for a bottom and sentiment and felt like things can get better in coming years, I kept thinking, gosh, you would think with all this tariffs and return to maybe inflation would concern people. So it did turn back down. The model said, oh, yes, we're still looking for a bottom. So it's the model is negative on the consumer sentiment. That's not a real timing tool for the stock market. The stock market can ignore it for quite a while. But it is still concerning. It dropped from 54 to 50, one of the largest drops they've seen in a while. So it's like overnight, suddenly the consumers just said, world's falling apart. But when you look behind it, the real better information was what would they think about inflation? And it turns out they expect something like 6.7%. If I get the exact number, it's over 6%. That's where they think inflation's going to over the next 5 years. Now, they've been leaning that way for a while, but it's picked up the pace. It's hung in there very well. And it makes sense when we hear the negative side of tariffs that they're following the news. But somebody pointed out on some of these big media Wall Street sites or TV shows that it's probably the highest since 1981 or 82 or something like that. So the consumer is definitely concerned of higher inflation. They're dialing it in and they're just assuming they're going to have to pay. So that dials in my model to still warn that along with many other factors, we can be heading on our way towards a recession here. And these tariffs can add to it. So again, that inflation behind that consumer sentiment is primarily related to tariffs still. And on the tariff front, in case people don't know how tariffs work, when those boats show up at the ports in U.S., the customs are going to slap on higher taxes than they had before, and maybe they weren't even having taxes, but now they do. And so that American business that's going to pick up their goods they just bought and had just had delivered, they suddenly have an extra bill that they're just not used to having. I mean, some of these people, one guy said, well, I got $50,000 worth of product coming and I'm going to pay $125,000 for it. And he says, I don't know, so I want to pay it. This could make up some real shockers at ports. Now, and I just reading and I just listening to some of the comments from the White House here a few minutes ago. They had a little press briefing, and they are saying a lot of this. There's supposed to be some delays there to help businesses. So in other words, whatever's on the boat coming across the ocean probably won't get hit that way. But the point is, as long as this lasts, eventually somebody's got to pay it. And it's going to be a big problem. And the country is worried about it. This is why the stock market's off 22%, even though some are trying to bargain hunt right now and try to make a bottom. This tariff stuff, the longer it takes to fix it, the more likely we'll get bad economic data coming out. There's already some big name Wall Street, even Jamie Dimon come out from JP Morgan just said, we're probably going to slide lower here. He wasn't talking about stock market, just the economy. A few other big billionaires like that are saying, if we're not already in a recession, we're going to be there. We're heading that way. And that's where my model is saying is we're due for at least a secondary recession, which means it could be a deeper correction setback than what we normally get, but doesn't quite tip the scales so that the government and economists say, yes, that's officially a recession. I can see we could slip by, but the point is it's probably going to be close enough that we really should be concerned. It's not going to be a good economic time here. And I can see the economy having problems right into early next year, even though, for the stock market, I can come up with some different thinking of that the stock market can bottom ahead of a bottom economy. It normally does. But the way I look at it, it's going to be touch and go, and we should be concerned of problems from now right into October for our economy and the stock market, And even though the stock market's off 22%, and with this business cycles, normally I say, okay, we have a once a decade buy signal, and the stock market goes up like 100%, 1 to 400%. Then we get a once a decade sell signal, and we get a recession, and the stock market goes down 20 to 50%. But we can break that into increments when you can see like every other year we're up and a year before between or down, things like that. And we're in one of those lesser important moments when normally would expect the market to be down 13 to 20, a little more than 20%. Well, we're down more than 20%. So I fully understand why some people are trying to be optimistic here and, we'll put the brakes on and we're going to fix this tariff stuff. But I have to warn you, at least once twice every 50 or a little more years, the market is going down 36% and still went higher later. So all I'm saying is it may not be an end of world scenario, bone-crushing recession, but it could be real ugly yet in the stock market before we go on to better days and get record highs later. And it's just a matter of how quickly can we pull out of this tariff stuff, how quickly we fix it. I mean, I'm fine with trying to rebalance, reset all this trade stuff. We probably needed to. I'm not too sure tariffs was the best way to go, but maybe it was the only one. But we just have to recognize that the history, it doesn't look good when it comes to tariffs. When you're doing nationwide type tariffs, like what President Trump is doing, it reminds me of Herbert Hoover back in the Depression when the stock market dropped 89%. We had 30% unemployment and stuff like that. Even though, and some people want to blame it all on tariffs, I don't think that's fair. but the tariffs was a big portion of it. It really helped the decline, So who knows where we're really going, because there's a lot of uncharted territory of just how this could just blow up in our faces here. And it is something to be concerned about. My gut feeling is no, we're not going to see. I don't think the stock market goes lower than 35%, at least for this year. But I'm warning people, it might be 50 or 60%. Nobody knows for sure, And it is interesting. I can see how the market's behaving much like the 1987 crash, the 2020 crash. It's behaving like the early 2000s with the Y2K and the dot-com blowout crash. It's and it might even be a miniature 1929. I just can't go there for a true 1929, but I think we can print enough money and put things around quick enough to stop that. But the risk is there. But I don't think any of us is smart enough, and I feel like I know as much as anybody, and I've done very well for 30 years. And I don't find enough where I want to be that negative. I just find enough, yes, we better consider it and be looking over our shoulders here to make sure we don't get too carried away. And of course, that then brings the stock market. I think really we're got risk of still lower going into about May, June. And if things get fixed with tariff after it starts up out of that type of bottom, we may learn it goes higher in the next year. We survived it. But if they don't fix the tariffs, we may learn the stock market is lower still by September, October. I'm knocking on wood, but the model's saying October is the latest to put an end to this problem and get some kind of a recovery bounce here. But I don't see like record highs in the stock market until next year, and we're going to have some more economic data that's going to make us nervous. So
Right.
it's coming.
Right on. All right, so let's talk a little bit about on the grain side, just a little bit. As you watch price of corn, what you see happen there, wheat, those kind of things have all had some pretty good moves here over the last couple of weeks. Basically, almost put back on what lost when the big tariff announcements came on, which obviously is pointing towards weather issues. As you see that's coming on, you've talked a little bit about some weather things that you're tracking as you look at that. But as you look at world supply right now, Rich, nobody's really getting off to a good start when it comes to planting. Second crop corn in Brazil is not looking good. You look at wheat quality in Europe and Australia, and you start looking at where rice and those kind of things are playing into the mix. Nobody's really starting off to really good start here this cropping year and this planting season. So, looking at that, Rich, what are your thoughts on the grains, and what are you feeling right there?
The recent run up here in the last 5-7 days, the model was saying it's time to go up, and it actually turned out a little better than what I thought. The model allowed for it, but I thought I'd be looking at some of the lower targets, and a nice march up just nonstop for 5-7 days. That's the best performance I've seen in a while here. So people were getting caught up. They're a little nervous that they dialed in a little too much of this macroeconomic stuff and the tariff stuff, and they got to take care of their normal business. And so the commercials found, well, we got to buy it, and apparently the farmer's not scared yet of the future. He wants a little better price, and they know the economics. Farmer needs a little better price. So it did put it up, and it's making sense to me. And really, as what you pointed out in Brazil there for the corn, that's making sense. I think the model's saying, yeah, you might see a little dip next week, but it is friendly towards the end of the month, maybe even start of May. But there might be a bigger setback in May. And I'm wondering, is that also going to be a return to macroeconomics and economy and tariffs and dollar and stuff like that? So I'd be a little cautious in May. But I'm still, I wish if we didn't have the tariff stuff, I've been saying for 6 months now, the market ought to go higher into June, July of this year. And we really do have that set up, even though there's actually plenty of grain. It's just enough where you could see, if we didn't have all the political stuff and tariff stuff, the market would have been just edging higher from last October right into this summer. And that's still on the table. It's only the tariff stuff that could interfere here and cause some issues. So I'm rather optimistic we'll get another bounce in June, July, maybe a little dip in May. And then we'll just have to see in June, July, will this weather really shape up? Some of my indicators I'm using, they're not as quite as optimistic of a big crop problem. But, I've said, well, if it isn't this year, it's the next 2 years, and that's the latest I'll give it for some types of what things I'm looking at. I think it's building. I was looking at some European markets and then comparing the weather. And I favor more of a problem next year, frankly, in the crop, especially global. But it's interesting. I feel like we've been in La Nina even when the government didn't really say we were. I mean, we got evidence on our own drought monitor map that there's dry and droughtness all across the U.S. I'm not convinced it's serious yet enough. But, let's put it this way. I'm willing to go with the model saying there's some chances to move higher in the summer. And what I'm thinking of is it could just become more bullish still if you had that weather on top. But at the same time, I don't want to forget this macro stuff, because this tariff stuff, if we don't get a crop problem, it can make prices go even lower still on a good crop, just because we're killing our recession or economy. We're killing the global economy. Even with the tariffs, that should make prices higher. I'm concerned you'll see the highest prices at the store level and the middleman, right, and the factories. And I'm just a little concerned the producer on the commodity side, the farmer side, really won't get that support out of that national inflation. I could be wrong on that. I'm willing to leave the door open that it gets better. But to me, to really make the commodity markets go up considerably, it's not inflation. It's got to have a crop problem.
Yeah.
And that certainly is, it's due. That's all we can say is it's due.
Right. Well, you look at the data out there, and there's the amount of you look at some of the stuff like cold weather and those kind of things creeping into the late April, early May timeframe, which isn't good. You start looking at all the flooding that we've seen in the middle eastern corn belt. What that looks like, it's not good either. So a lot of replant, a lot of preventive plant stuff that's going to start showing up too. So a lot of
might have something like a 95, 95, 96 there for that bull market. Yeah. I was just getting started in the business as far as working outside of our grain and farming businesses, and it was trying to help people and sell my ideas. And then plus I was speculating, and I nailed that bull market pretty good. And I was even shocked. I met some Cargill people. I can remember like December 1995, they didn't really understand what had occurred. Said, well, we haven't heard anything from our analyst. And I said, you better tell your farmers you're going to be paying more for feed in the next 6 months. And boy, it worked. But how did that happen in 95? It was cool, wet spring, and then it turned hot and dry. Right. And we haven't seen that pattern in a while. I mean, statistically, you got to put it on the table, right? So. Yep, for sure. All right, Rich, appreciate you being on the podcast one more time, where people can find your website and your podcast. Yep, go to criticalpointpod.com. You can also email me at criticalpointpod@gmail.com. And my other addresses, my oldest address is rich@ag-financial.com. You can find me on Twitter at rich_Posson, Posson. I'm also, they could just look up Rich Posson under Threads and Blue Sky. I'm on those as well. But the big news here on my end for my firm is we got this brand new website and new subscriptions, and people are liking it very well. And just go to criticalpointpod.com to learn more. Yeah, right on. Rich, appreciate you being on. We'll catch you again next time. Okay, thank you very much. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these fine messages.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planner upgrades and see why nothing runs like a deer. All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Aaron Finnell back on here to talk about what's happening in the marketplace. Aaron, how you doing today, bud? I am terrific, sir. That's good. Glad you had to think about that for a while. Didn't really roll off the tongue. I was going to get, over eloquent about it, but just go. Yeah. Well, it's a planting season, and haven't quite hit. Still, I was joking around with a guy the other day that Florida has hurricane season. And you never know you for sure when you're going to be out of hurricane season, but there's a window there that once you get past this window, then you're pretty much in the good. Well, in the Panhandle of Nebraska, we have second winter, and we're still in that window to get that last, 18 inches of snow at 60 miles an hour time frame. So we have gotten a foot of snow on Mother's Day. Yeah, we have. So we're still in that window, but as you look at things, there's some cold mornings that we're seeing. We're starting to see those 25, 28 degree days or mornings with overnights, those kind of things, and then those 75 degree days. So we are rapidly getting close to the optimal soil temperature that we need to have start planting, so we're not that far away from all that fun stuff breaking loose in the panel. Probably got a lot of guys out there getting their sugar beets ready to go.
Yeah,
They're
I've seen, say from Denver to Rapid in the countryside, I've seen beets kind of the whole way through there. So
yeah, that time of the year. It's also that time of the year too where you would start to think that things would start to slow down a little bit just because of where they're at, but it feels like they're actually picking up comparatively to where they would be normally in a normal year. As you look at the marketplace, what do you see happening right now?
Nice segue. That was beautiful.
You like that? It's professional.
It was seamless. The it's funny. It's kind of back to, I don't remember I believe we talked about it last week. The culmination of the machinery's high price, the interest is high price, and everything's last minute.
Mm-hmm.
It's the middle of April. I'm getting planter tractor calls.
Yeah.
I sold a planter last week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that stuff wasn't even, in the 400 plus category. That's the real choker in the industry, if you will. But it's really, I guess in my, easy math, 25 years of selling, I don't recall any last minute stuff like this. Now, our company, it's the weirdest thing. We've talked about it in the history of the podcast, but we have kind of a harvest rush in June here because of wheat. Yeah. We don't have that August combine push.
Right.
We have it in June, right before, because everybody gets their combines out, they're cleaning them up, getting them ready for wheat, and let's trade. That's when plus you find a wheat seed will fall out of it that a corn kernel won't. So that's also beneficial, let alone millet harvest. Woo.
Yeah.
But it's if you know what the hurry up, I need a combine, it's wheat season. If you know what that's like for anybody probably just in the Great Plains, but if you know what that is like, that's exactly how this planting season has been.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm working with a guy on trading sprayers, and he point blank told me, I was really hoping I could drag this across the finish line this year, but she's going to fall on her face and I got to do something.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. There's a lot of got to do something.
Yeah. And that's typical that you would see in years where you're coming out of a down cycle and you're starting to level things out, where just like what you just said, they've limped along for the last 2 years, 3 years, whatever, how long the time frame's been. And then now they're like, we just can't. One, I don't have time to fix everything now. Right. And secondly, I don't have time to not and be down. You know what I mean? I've got to keep my stuff up and running. So it's
which is very reminiscent, as you recall, 14 through 16 or so.
Yep.
We're going to stretch and wire and tape and zip tie, and if it don't cross the finish line, that's when we do something.
You look at 15 and 16; both of those years were 2 years that were last minute runs in to get, hey, I need this, I need that, I need that. Right. I'm looking to do this now. I'm ready to move forward with this, those kind of things. So it's kind of history's a little bit repeating itself here a little bit as far as market conditions continue to better. It's you look at the auction marketplace and auction values year over year are up, and then even from the first of the year to where they're at now are even up. We're not up 25 or 30%, anything like that, but it's not. And when I say things are up, a lot of that too, what I'm saying is that they're not going down anymore, right? They're right. It's they leveled off a little bit, they stabilized, and they've kind of hit a little bit of a bump, and you're seeing some strength there.
And it's worth mentioning, even if it's 50 cents up, because we have been in an 18-month free fall.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
So any kind of bottom, any kind of deviation that isn't down is worth mentioning and worth running with.
Yep. One thing I'm pleasantly surprised by is the strength of that $200,000 to $250,000 combine and where they are at. You know what I mean? Like, it's that, like, those are the ones that you'd watch sell for like 180. Now they're selling for 225 to 250. I've even seen some $280,000, you know, $1,500 combines, and I'm like, really? Wow, that is a crazy turn of events.
You know why that is, don't you?
I don't.
I think I know why on the green side. It's something you're a big fan of, and I'm not. That combine you're mentioning on the green side is an 18 to 20 S7 series, correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Technology upgradable.
Sure. That's probably
so you can go get, and that's what's pushing them from 180 back over 2. Right. Because everybody, I can't believe it. It just shows you how many were sold. But there are still 12 through 14 S600 series combines out in the field. Yeah. They're not all in South America and Europe. There are still some on the farm. So that guy obviously does not have a high value trade. Mm-hmm. He needs something. He needs to upgrade. Well, 200's a magic benchmark, as you know. And that is, man, that's about it. You know, of course, 10 years ago, that was a, 1-year-old combine? Yeah. Yeah. That was a 1-year-old. Yeah. Now it's we keep it under 1,500 SEP and we're good, you know? Right. Yeah. But you can upgrade that combine, I think even an 18, almost to what a off-the-line combine is.
It's amazing what you can put on a combine. Yeah, that's the
and I think that's what's pushing that. Just like you like to mention how every tractor made after 21 is robot ready. You know? So 10 years from now, there could be a 20's worth this and a 21's worth this when normally it'd be this. Right. And I think that is what's pushing those combines back to where they should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's I never thought of it like that, but it's a good point there, that the technology, the upgradable part of that technology is what could be driving some of that factor too.
Right.
The other side of that too is typical coming out of a downturn. It's never the high end equipment that gets picked off the shelf first. It's always that middle tier piece of equipment, right? That, you know, what used to be the $50,000 something is now the $200,000 something, but it's, you know, but so that's, you know, that's kind of where that threshold's at. So that band between 200 and 300,000 in a lot of cases is where you're at, because just like you talk about, you have the guy that's got the older combine, you know, it might be an $80,000, $100,000 used combine. You go down and put that on your $250,000 or $300,000 combine, and the banker's happy with you. And I think that's that's kind of the system that we're in right now too. But the technology side of that is another spurt. I think that's being added into the mix as well. One thing too, like you talked about earlier, talking about planting tractors, so that row crop tractor marketplace. I was scared to death of what row crop tractors looked like in coming out of the first quarter, right? You go back and look where they were at. There was something like 15 or 16,000, 175 horsepower and up tractors on the marketplace. If you go back and look at 2014 timeframe, I want to say there was something like 18,000 something. There's like 1,500 less tractors today than there was in 2014. No, you were also paying 150% less for a tractor back then too. So I mean, that's kind of a scary number to start looking at the volume of dollars that are out there in those tractors. But it feels like that marketplace has really picked up, and you're seeing some movement there. A lot of that too has to do with price adjustments dealers have made across the board, and those kind of things, and resetting the marketplace to where it's at. And you're starting to see that retail value of the marketplace come down and the auction value come up, and you're starting to see that 120% band get tighter. And so as you watch those things move along, you start to see those things come into play with each other, and that's making a big difference there. Talk about the row crop tractor market that you've been seeing.
You're spot on. It was such a mind-blowing glut, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, we've had tractor problems before, but nothing like, nobody's had tractor problems like that. And it was just overnight, you know. It wasn't, but it felt like it. The biggest thing that I've seen is we had our big giant auction flush right away. And then everybody, due to the pain involved, hit the brakes. And then there was nothing. It was just ghost town for 6 months. On the wholesale side, you know, I'd sell a handful here, a handful there. And that was really it, you know. Kind of all of 24. Then as we turn the page in 25, somebody turned the faucet on. And the biggest, you're right, the biggest factor to that is you have dealers who participated right away in the auction flush and dealers who didn't. And the dealers who didn't were going with the internal programs, try to, you know, reinvent the wheel without the 100 loss. Just figure something out to move these things. But these guys got a dose of reality and came down. These guys eventually did, which with these being as soon as it's, and I'm sure there's fancy equipment business terms for it that I'm not aware of, but it's almost like as the dealers came down, the auctions started climbing. And buyer perception has, you know, some kind of factor in that, I would assume, is what makes that happen. It's got to be some kind of psychology thing. But that has had probably the biggest impact on it, to the point of, I would dare say it's more than a slow trickle even. I would say it's a steady light flow. As far as moving them, and it's, you know, a handful a week, just bang, 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 bang.
And I think that's what you see when you see these things start to flip, is that as that retail price starts to come down and the auction value comes up with it, as you're watching those things come together. Because as those things start to spread out, it's just a psychological thing. I think when you start looking at auction values,
right?
When auction values are sliding, they're just, it's accelerating way, like that spread between retail and auction value just accelerates, right? And as that gap gets bigger, it goes even faster. And sooner or later, as the retail price start to readjust themselves and come back into play, you start seeing that auction value starts to settle now, because people are like, okay, well, I can buy it for this much from the dealer, or I can buy it this much at the auction. Which juice is worth the squeeze, right?
Right.
And they start playing that game, and when you start looking at, when a consumer looks at the dealer retail price and says, you know what, I think that I see the value there at the dealership, right? So, you know, that's when you truly the auction value becomes a quote unquote kind of cash price that you would see, you know, start trickling and start to play. And that's where I think we're at now. That's starting to accelerate. You're starting to see that flip. You saw the same thing happen in 2016, 2017. When that got tight again at one point, that, you know, I always say 120% is kind of where you need to be auction to retail, where your retail value is 120% higher than auction value. In 2016, 17 timeframe, it kind of overcorrected itself to where it was like 108 to 111%. And then it kind of spread back out to where it was back into that 120% band. But it's just like everything else. Everything swings one way, then it swings back the other way, and then it finally comes back to the middle where it's supposed to be. And I think we're starting to see that now.
To your point, auction values are an elevator. It free falls down, and it really climbs really slow up. You can beat it by taking the stairs.
Right.
But that's a pretty good way to look at it. When they're going down, it's fast and you don't know where it stops.
Yep.
But they do come up. It's just click, click, click.
Yep. It takes a while for it to rebound. So
right.
All right, man. That's a great place to stop. If folks want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Call me or text me, 308-760-1193, or shoot me an email, Aaron, or afintel@21equip.com.
Right on. You can find me anywhere on the social medias, either at Weaving Iron LLC, or you can go to Weaving Iron Podcast. You can find it there. You can see this podcast on AgWeb, and you can also go to the Farm Journal YouTube channel. You can check it out there as well. And that's where you can find me. So check it out. We do this every week, every Thursday this drops. So I appreciate everybody coming over to the Farm Journal side and being a part of this. So I look forward to continue to do this with Greg and Aaron and all the other guests we have on there. So I want to especially thank John Deere for being a sponsor of this podcast. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Aaron Fennell, Greg Machinery, Pete Peterson, and Rich Boston. Smooth Smart folks. Out.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, Moving Iron is available on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere podcasts are found. So until next time, let's move some iron.